Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya Yato Anvayaditaratascha Artheshu Abhignaswarat Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yatsuraya Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatra Trisargo Mrisha Dhamna Svena Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Nigamakalpataror Galitam Phalam Shukamukad Amrita Drava Sanyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha. We enter the 60th chapter of the 10th Skandha of Bhagavatam. So, this chapter has a very sweet dialogue between Krishna and Rukmini, where Krishna first teases Rukmini and later Rukmini beautifully glorifies Krishna. So, what happens is one night Rukmini is serving the Lord, her husband, Krishna, along with her female companions, as he is seated in the bed, and the Supreme Lord, who is the source of the whole universe, in whom the whole universe rests, he is there in the human form, sitting there, and Rukmini is beholding him, and Rukmini is so happily serving him, but Krishna senses a slight pride in her, and therefore we'll see how Krishna talks to her to remove the pride, because Rukmini, who is the primary consort, the first consort of Krishna, as we saw, is so happy in serving Krishna, and she is making sure that everything is done perfectly. Krishna is sitting there on a white cushion which is as spotless as foam of milk, and the whole place, the quarters, is so beautifully decorated with pearl strings hanging, with gems everywhere, with flowers of and garlands of jasmines decorating the place, and with moon rays coming through the windows, and there is a gentle breeze blowing, and there is the fragrance of the parijata tree coming through the from the garden through the windows, and there is incense burning. So it's a very beautiful evening where Rukmini is serving Krishna in her inner quarters, and her maid servants are there to help her, and so she herself takes the hand of from the hand of her one of her female companions a fan, and she starts fanning him with it, and she is herself dressed so beautifully with beautiful rings and bangles and bracelets, and her anklets are making a nice music as she is moving gently, and she is wearing saffron, and she is looking ravishing herself, and she is fanning the Lord very beautifully, and seeing her devotion, but also in that seeing a subtle pride, Krishna talks to her as if teasing. So Krishna says, O Rukmini, you do know that you were sought after by so many kings, and they all had great power, great strength, great wealth, and all the rest. And you left all of them, and you chose us as your husband, and I am no match for you. So Krishna says in a very self-deprecating way, which you'll see how beautifully Rukmini will flip it. But Krishna first teases her by speaking in a self-deprecating way, which can be very difficult for Rukmini, because he says, all these great kings were there, they were all courting you, and you instead chose us, and we are no match for you. And further she says, further Krishna says, you do know that when Jarasandha attacked, we came away running from Mathura all the way to Dwaraka and settled in this ocean. So Krishna is referring again in a self-deprecating way, because Krishna decimated the army of Jarasandha 17 times, and the 18th time when he was about to attack, Krishna decided to not engage him, but instead ran away from there with Balaram, as we saw, and came to Dwaraka, where a city was set up inside the ocean. So Krishna refers to this and says, we after all ran away, afraid of the army, and came to this ocean, whereas those kings are all very valorous. So you do know that those women who follow or who take as husband men who are not of the same caliber, And the men who are not very clear and whose ways are not in keeping with the world. So Krishna is referring to himself. He says that my ways are not in keeping with the world, and therefore any woman who chooses a man like me will have to suffer, because after all, Krishna says, I own nothing, and people who love me also own nothing. He says beautifully, Nishkinchana Vayam Shashwat Nishkinchana Janapriyaha. He says, we don't own anything, and those who love me also don't own anything. And therefore, those who are truly wealthy do not resort to me at all. So we will see how all these have a different meaning which will be brought out. But as a hint, already we know that one of the glorifications of Krishna is called Akinchana Gochara, that is, those who don't own anything surrender unto him. In other words, those who don't consider anything as mine, even if they be the kings, the ones who do not consider anything to be their wealth or their kingdom, but everything is belonging to the supreme energy of the Lord. Only those who don't have any sense of mine worship Krishna. So that is the inner meaning. But here he says, we don't own anything, and those who love us are also owning nothing. And you do know that marriage and friendship ought to be between people who are equal in wealth and birth and sovereignty and so on. So he is indicating, therefore, that you are this wealthy princess and you had all these kings lining up for you. They all had big armies and all the other opulences. And here we are, we don't own anything, because technically Krishna is not even on the throne of Dwaraka, because it is Ugrasena, his grand uncle, who is on the throne. So Krishna does not own the throne of Dwaraka. Therefore, he does not own any wealth, even from a material standpoint in Dwaraka. Everything belongs to the king, which is Ugrasena. So Krishna says one has to marry only one's equal, but you have here married someone who is not your equal. Ignoring all these facts, you have married. So even now, you can find a very eminent king and get married. So this is highly hurtful to Rukmini, because Rukmini cannot even stand these words when Krishna says this. And that is the intent of Krishna. Twofold. One is to remove whatever subtle pride she has, and two is to also bring out the beautiful ways in which Rukmini will profess her love for Krishna. So Krishna concludes by saying that the only reason, by the way, that I took you, that is, I came all the way and married you, is because I wanted to curb the pride of Jarasandha and Sishupala and Rukmi, that is the brother of Rukmini. All these kings who had hatred for me, I wanted to curb their pride, and that is why I came there and vanquished them. But as such, I have no desire for women or children or wealth, because I am always in the bliss of my own self. Krishna says, Udasina vayam nunam nastra apatya artha kamukaha atmalabda asmahe purna gehayor jyotirakriyaha. He says, just as a light in a room doesn't do anything, the light in the room, see, Krishna gives a beautiful simile. He says the light in the room illuminates the whole room, but it does not do anything. And yet, without the light, nothing can happen. Similarly, Krishna says, as pure consciousness, I simply abide like the light, and therefore I do not own anything. So, Krishna says from multiple perspectives, ultimately, as pure consciousness, I don't own anything. And even from a material plane, because I'm not the king, I don't own anything. And therefore, in all these ways, Krishna seemingly self-deprecatingly speaks. And Rukmini now is completely shocked. Krishna says all this and keeps quiet to see what she does. And she seems like she is struck with terror. She is shuddering and she is shedding tears. And tears are falling down her breasts and falling down. and her face is cast down, her hands are shaking, the fan drops from her hand, the body is shaking, and then finally she couldn't even stand still, her body simply falls down in a swoon. So Krishna did not even want this kind of reaction from Rukmini, but because of her intense love, these words of Krishna, which were said in jest, affected Rukmini so much that Rukmini fell down unconscious. So Krishna went down to bring her up and then held her in a warm embrace and told her, "O Rukmini, do not be angry. I was just speaking in jest. I know you are devoted to me. After all, I thought I will just see you quiver with a little bit of anger because it is pleasing to see." So, this is also one of the modes of intimacy, Krishna says, to see, because Rukmini especially is such a sattvic, calm wife. So, Satyabhama, we saw how she is very valorous and she is also prone to showing her anger. But Rukmini is very calm and Krishna has never seen her angry. So Krishna says, I spoke to you in this manner to see if you'll get angry, but not to make you fall down like this. So Rukmini now gets up and she is now settled down, she is comforted, and she realizes that the whole thing is just a joke, and she is now settled down in the sense that she is not anymore affected by it, but now she retorts. And she gives a very beautiful retort. After she has composed and collected herself, she retorts beautifully and she says, "Oh Lord, you are indeed right what you said." She says finally, she says, now we will see the response of Rukmini, how she counters everything Krishna said. So Rukmini says, you are indeed right that I am no match for you, because you are, after all, the Lord of the whole universe, established in your own greatness. And who am I in front of you? Therefore, indeed, I am no match for you. Then Krishna said that, as we can recall, Krishna said, when these kings came attacking, I went and settled down in this ocean. So Rukmini beautifully says, indeed, you are right about that too, because these kings represent the gunas, the three modes of nature, because they are all activated by the gunas, and you instead go and reside in the heart, which is the ocean. So you reside in the heart of the devotees, which is like the ocean and which is away from the access of the three gunas. And that is what it means. So you are indeed right that you hide yourself in the ocean that cannot be accessed by the three gunas, which are these kings. And you therefore subdue these senses without even engaging with them. And she further says, even the great sages who are fond of you, who are devoted to you, even their ways are incomprehensible. How can one then understand your ways? Because it is certainly true that you are akinchana. Now she responds to that verse Krishna said, I am nishkinchana, that is, I do not own anything. So Rukmini says, you are right, in fact, in that too. Why? Because one can own something only when there is something other than him. Because everything here is you alone, how can you own anything? She beautifully says, Nishkinchano nanubhavan na yato asti kinchid yasmai. There is nothing other than you here. So, very beautifully, she turns the table on Krishna and she says, therefore, you are right. You do not own anything, because to own something, there has to be something outside of you. There is nothing outside of you. Everything here is you alone. And therefore, that is also true what you said. And then she says, only people who are blinded by wealth and engaging in sense gratification, they do not understand you and they waste their life. But you are the very embodiment of all human pursuits. That is the object of all human pursuits. So, if people desire wealth or pleasure or righteousness or liberation, all of that is coming forth only from you. Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. And you are the personification of absolute joy. And realizing you, the wise give up everything. She says, Tvam vai samasta purusharthamaya phalatma yadvanchaya samutayo visrujanti kritsnam. Realizing you, the wise give up everything else because you are the object of all pursuits, and only those who are attached to sense pleasures do not recognize you. Therefore, she says, I have elected you as my husband quite appropriately because I know your glory. Even the great sages who have given up everything, they worship you. The great sages recognize you as the soul of the universe, and therefore they worship you. Whereas those who have their fortunes completely taken away by time, they are the ones who are the object of worship of people who are attached to the world. So Krishna, she says to Krishna, she says, the ones who are attached to the world alone go after those kings, because those kings, whatever they own, are all subject to time, whereas whatever you are is beyond time. And therefore, she says that you are the most appropriate for me. And in fact, the way you simply by the twang of your bow drove away all the kings, when you drove away the kings such as Sishupala and Jarasandha and so on, simply by coming to coming to Vidarbha and snatching me away, and they couldn't do anything, as a lion would drive away other animals. And therefore, you are the most appropriate for me. Where is the question? Further, she says, you are telling me that I, being a great princess, ought not to have married you. But let's look at all the great kings who have come seeking you by renouncing their royal throne and going to the forest. So she gives all the various kings who we have seen in Bhagavatam, such as Prithu, Bharata, Yayati, Gaya, all the great kings, and there are many more. Every one of them, they retire to the forest to realize you. So when they all left the kingdom and came to the forest to realize you, what is the great thing about me coming away from my my palace life as a princess to you here? And therefore, she says, it is your lotus feet that grants freedom, that grants liberation. That is the resort of all men of wisdom. So, which woman with clear insight on the right purpose of life would seek anyone other than you? You are indeed my befitting partner, and nobody else but you is my beloved. And anyone who can go to any other king, such as Shishupala, they can live their lives in the bodily platform attached to the material wealth, but it is the life of animals. She says very pointedly that those who are attached to wealth and attached to bodily platform, it is no different from living like animals, because animals also live and die, and they do not recognize the ultimate purpose of life. Therefore, she says that all I seek is to burn with love for you. So she beautifully says, I wish to burn with love for your lotus feet, and nothing else matters to me. Such a beautiful expression of love, she says. Astvam bhujaksha mamate charananuraga atman ratasya mai cha anirikta drishte. She says, I wish to burn with love for your lotus feet and do not seek anything else. After all, only worldly women, she says, will seek other men and be interested in princes and kings and so on. I am only interested in you, the Supreme Lord. So when she says these words, Bhagavan is very pleased, And so he responds to her and he says, "You've spoken very beautifully, Rukmini. Whatever I said was a joke, and it's in order to only demonstrate also your one pointed devotion. Everything you have said is true. You've said it beautifully, and you are always blessed, and you are always devoted to me, and you are always one with me." And Krishna further says that I know your love and your devotion, and this only shows how your mind is single pointed and fixed. And then, after all, Krishna adds that being devoted to me can give one anything, including liberation, freedom. So, those who devote themselves unto me and ask for petty things such as material wealth and pleasures, they are being very miserly when they can ask for the highest, which is supreme freedom. You have practiced such devotion unto me, which is so hard and so rare, and you are, after all, always my most favorite and primary consort. And you did send this most beautiful message. So Krishna recalls the beautiful message that she sent through a sagely Brahmana when she was about to be given to Shishupala, how the message was so beautifully written, addressing Krishna as Bhuvana Sundara, the most beautiful among the whole universe. So Krishna says, you sent this most beautiful and confidential message that can only be written by you, and it was so perfectly worded, which made me leave immediately, and you were even ready to drop your body if I delayed, so I had to come immediately. And therefore Krishna concludes by saying that this is your great unique love, and let that unique love of yours always be glorified. I can only hail it with joy. I cannot even repay it. So, in a similar way, how Krishna said earlier with the gopis also that he cannot repay their love because that's so pure. Rukmini's love is also so pure. So, Krishna says, I cannot repay this love of yours, but only glorify it in this way by making it known to the whole world. So, in this way, Shukha Brahma Rishi concludes that the Lord was sporting with Lakshmi, who is in the form of Rukmini, in such beautiful ways, playfully bringing out various moods of intimacy, which is very playful and very tasteful, and yet also bringing out the highest nectar of devotion. And thereby, Shukha Brahmarshi concludes that the Lord was sporting in the mansions with all the other spouses as well, perfectly discharging his duties as a householder. So with this chapter ends. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.